The waiter had already asked me twice if I wanted to leave, but I kept staring at the empty chair across from me as if the person I was waiting for might suddenly appear. 37 minutes had passed since the time of my blind date. My phone remained silent. No message. No apology. Nothing. I finally picked up my coat, embarrassed and heartbroken, when the restaurant door opened, and the one person I never expected to see walked straight toward my table. It was my CEO. She stopped beside me, looked at the untouched coffee, and quietly asked, "Can I tell you something?" Before we continue, if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes the person who changes your life arrives when you have already stopped waiting for anyone. My name is Daniel, and until that evening, I had convinced myself that I was perfectly comfortable being alone. I was 32, worked as a financial analyst at one of the most successful technology companies in the city, and had spent the last 3 years building a life that looked stable from the outside. But stability can sometimes be another word for hiding. After my mother passed away, my apartment became painfully quiet, and after my last relationship ended with a simple text message saying that I was too emotionally unavailable, I stopped trying to meet anyone. My younger sister, Emily, refused to let me become a permanent bachelor. She was the one who secretly created my profile on a dating app and arranged the blind date. She told me the woman was kind, intelligent, and looking for something serious. I resisted for days, but eventually agreed. I remember Emily laughing when I left home that evening, telling me that perhaps my life was finally about to change. I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early. I chose a small table near the window and ordered coffee. Outside, rain slid down the glass while headlights moved through the wet streets like blurred stars. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. I checked my phone again and again, trying not to look desperate even though there was nobody there to see me. At 37 minutes, I finally understood. She wasn't coming. I felt foolish. Not because a stranger had rejected me, but because some small part of me had actually hoped that tonight would be different. I put my phone into my pocket, reached for my coat, and promised myself I would never allow anyone to arrange another blind date again. Then the restaurant door opened. I recognized her immediately. Victoria Hayes. The CEO of our company. She was wearing a simple black coat, her hair slightly damp from the rain, and there was something unusually tired about her expression. Victoria was the kind of woman employees whispered about in elevators. Brilliant, demanding, elegant, and almost impossible to approach. I had spoken to her only twice in 3 years, both times during company meetings. She walked directly toward me. For a moment, I wondered if I was dreaming. She stopped at my table and looked at the empty chair. Then she looked at me. Instead of giving the professional smile she usually wore at work, she gave me a small, almost nervous smile. "Can I tell you something?" I nodded. She sat down. I was so confused that I couldn't even think of what to say. Victoria noticed my expression and gave a quiet laugh. She explained that she had not come there as my CEO. She had come as the woman who had agreed to meet me. My heart seemed to stop. The blind date had been Victoria. Suddenly, every detail made sense. The vague description Emily had given me. The strange secrecy. The insistence that I not search for the woman online. Emily had known exactly who she was. But Victoria's next words changed everything. She told me she had arrived early and had been sitting in her car across the street. She had seen me through the window, sitting alone with my coffee. She had watched me check my phone, glance toward the door, and finally lower my head in disappointment. She said she had almost walked inside several times. Then she didn't. I asked why. She looked down at her hands and admitted that she had become frightened. Not frightened of me. Frightened of what might happen if someone actually saw the woman behind the CEO. For years, Victoria had built walls around herself. Her father had started the company, and after his sudden death, she had taken control when she was only 29. She spent years proving that she belonged in the position. She learned to hide exhaustion, sadness, loneliness, and fear because she believed successful people were never allowed to break. She told me that she had dated before, but every relationship eventually became about her money, her position, or her name. She had stopped believing people could genuinely care about her. Then Emily had shown her my profile. Victoria had apparently asked my sister about me for weeks. Emily told her about my mother's death, my quiet personality, my habit of helping people without expecting anything in return, and how I had spent years taking care of everyone except myself. Victoria said those stories were what made her curious. But curiosity wasn't enough to overcome fear. I expected to feel angry. Instead, I felt strangely sad for her. The woman sitting across from me was not the powerful CEO everyone feared. She was simply someone who had spent so long pretending to be strong that she had forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable. We stayed at that restaurant for nearly 2 hours. We didn't talk about romance. We talked about our families, our regrets, the things we had lost, and the dreams we had quietly abandoned. Victoria told me she still kept her father's old watch in her desk drawer because it was the last thing he had given her. I told her about my mother's handwritten recipes that I still couldn't bring myself to throw away. For the first time in years, I laughed without forcing it. When we finally left, Victoria stopped beneath the restaurant awning. Rain continued falling around us. She looked at me and said she didn't know what would happen next, but she didn't want fear to make the decision for her again. I told her that neither of us needed to decide anything that night. We simply walked toward our cars. The following Monday, everything at work felt different. Victoria remained my CEO, and I remained her employee. We were careful, professional, respectful. Nothing inappropriate happened. But something had changed between us. There was now a quiet understanding whenever our eyes met across a conference room. Then, 3 weeks later, my life collapsed. Our company announced a major restructuring. Several departments were being eliminated, and my position was one of them. I sat at my desk after everyone left, staring at the termination letter. I had bills to pay, my sister was depending on me to help with her small business, and suddenly the security I had spent years building disappeared in a single afternoon. I packed my things into a cardboard box. Before leaving, I went upstairs to return a company laptop. Victoria was still in her office. She saw the box in my hands. Her expression changed immediately. I told her I was leaving and thanked her for everything. She walked around her desk and stood in front of me. Then she said something I will never forget. She told me that my position was ending, but my value wasn't. She explained that the restructuring had nothing to do with my performance. In fact, she had personally recommended me for a new position at a partner company, one that would allow me to lead a financial recovery project and eventually become a department director. I was stunned. I asked her why she would do that. She smiled sadly and said that sometimes people spend their whole lives believing they have to prove they deserve a place at the table. She wanted me to understand that losing one chair didn't mean I had lost my place. Months passed. I accepted the new position. My confidence slowly returned. I began smiling more. I started visiting my sister every Sunday. I even opened my mother's old recipe book again and began cooking some of the meals she used to make. And Victoria? She became part of my life slowly, carefully, without promises we weren't ready to keep. One evening, almost a year after that rainy blind date, I took Victoria back to the same restaurant. This time, she arrived first. She was sitting by the window, holding 2 cups of coffee. When I walked in, she smiled. I sat across from her, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. She told me that the night she didn't show up had taught her something important. Sometimes we think we're being rejected when, in reality, someone is simply fighting a battle we cannot see. I squeezed her hand. I told her that I had learned something too. Sometimes the person who doesn't show up is not the end of your story. Sometimes their absence creates the space for someone unexpected to walk into your life. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may be going through a lonely season, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who need a reminder that life can change when we least expect it. And before we end, I have one special request. Comment, "I believe in second chances," if you believe that one painful moment should never be allowed to decide the rest of your life. Because sometimes the empty chair in front of you isn't a sign that you're unwanted. Sometimes it is simply making room for the person who was meant to sit there all along.